Weapons. Gold. Relics. Flags. Betrayals. Mysteries. And even unidentified flying objects. These are the titles of some of the most enigmatic mysteries surrounding World War II. In this new military history video, we will unravel them one by one and try to get to the truth. Let's get started.
There are few more infamous weapons in history than the pistol Hitler used to blow his brains out. It was intimately involved in a pivotal moment in history, but what happened to it remains a mystery.
Our first stop takes us to April 30th, 1945. As Red Army forces advanced through the streets of Berlin toward the Führer bunker, Adolf Hitler had to choose between two options: being caught by the Soviets or ending his life. The Führer had two Walther pistols, very popular among European forces, a PP and a PPK. Both would serve their purpose.
Hitler had both of these weapons with him in his study on the 30th of April. They had been placed loaded on a table in front of the sofa. At 3:30 p.m., Heinz Linger, Hitler's valet, opened the study door. The first thing he smelled was burnt almonds. It is a smell associated with cyanide poisoning.
The Nazi leader and his new wife, Eva Braun, whom he had married 24 hours earlier, decided to follow the same fate, although with different methods. She resorted to cyanide poisoning, while he opted for a shot to the head. The couple lay lifeless on the ground. It was time to follow the instructions left by the Nazi leader. Their bodies were to be taken to the garden of the Chancellery, to be burned and buried. Hitler's personal assistant, an SS officer named Otto Günsche, began preparations to carry out that task. It was he who picked up the two weapons that had ended up on the floor next to the corpses. From that moment on, the path of the pistols becomes somewhat uncertain. According to witnesses who were in the bunker, Günsche left them on a desk, and that is when another figure appeared on the scene, Arthur Axmann, the head of the Hitler Youth.
Axmann picked up the Walther PP and pocketed it. He said he would hide it for better times. Some sources claim that the PPK was handed to his adjutant, Welzin. Axmann and Welzin were both involved in the breakout from the bunker on the 1st of May 1945. Axmann managed to make it to the West and was only captured several months after the end of the war. When questioned about what happened to the pistol, he said that he buried it.
The Nazi claimed he had left it underground next to a bridge in Berlin, but the weapon was never found. If what Axmann said is true, the Walther PP with which Adolf Hitler took his own life could still be buried in the heart of Germany. However, there is no certainty about which of the two weapons was used for the fatal shot to the Führer's head. So the pistol that actually killed him could never have been in the hands of the headmaster of the Hitler Youth. But what if this piece of history remained in the possession of his assistant?
Welzin, he was captured by the Soviets. He died in Soviet captivity. This would probably explain why a battered Walther PPK turned up in the Moscow State Archives among other Hitler relics in 1991 after the fall of the Soviet Union. The pistol was reputedly kept by Stalin in his office and was known as the gun that Hitler used to kill himself with.
Without the necessary evidence to confirm which weapon Hitler used to take his life, or the exact location where his two pistols ended up, this has become the first of our great unsolved mysteries. But it is not the only one. The next case is that of
The Frank family had moved to Amsterdam from Germany to escape the rise of Hitler. They found safety in Holland, where Otto Frank ran a manufacturing business. But then the Nazis invaded in 1940. 2 years later, the Franks, Otto, wife Edith, Anne, and her sister Margot, along with 4 other Jewish friends of the family, went into hiding in an annex behind Otto's warehouse.
The family lived within 4 walls for years, hidden behind a bookcase with books and other objects that concealed the entrance to the annex. News about the Nazi treatment of the Jewish people came through the radio, and fear was the motivation for not moving from that place. However, what they did not expect was that terror would knock on their door. On August 4th, 1944, a call from an informant brought the security forces to the building.
It's a warm day, sunny, and around 10:30, between 10:30 and 11, a couple of men walk in.
They were detectives with a Dutch police unit working with the Nazis. An SS officer named Silberbauer led the team. They demanded to be shown around the warehouse.
They end up in front of the bookcase, which is hiding the entrance to the annex.
The details of the raid have remained shrouded in shadows. There are no documents that tell the official story, and the memories of those who were there are mixed with theories and assumptions. The only certainty that has left an indelible mark is the fate of the Franks.
On September 4th, 1944, the last transport went to Auschwitz. Well, when we arrived in Auschwitz, there were men standing there with clubs. Women here, men there. We were separated right onto the station. So women went to Birkenau camp, and we went to Auschwitz camp from the station, when I never saw my family again.
All the women in the family died. Anne, aged 15, died of typhus after being taken to the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. However, she remained alive in popular memory after her diary was found, in which she recounts her days of confinement and hiding during the Holocaust. For his part, her father Otto Frank was the only survivor of his family and spent years trying to discover who had betrayed them, informing the authorities about their hiding place. Although this was not an easy task.
Is that the raid may have been caused by somebody in the immediate area seeing something, hearing something, and reporting it, all living just a wall or two away from one another. When you take a look at the threats, the question isn't, what caused the raid? The question might be, how did they last more than 2 years without being discovered?
This former FBI agent, named Vince Pankoki, carried out a great investigation to find an answer to the question of who was the informer. His conclusion was that the one who betrayed Anne Frank and her family was Arnold van den Berg, a rich Hebrew notary who collaborated with the Nazis by providing information about hiding places to avoid being killed. However, this theory does not convince some historians, and the list of suspects grows. There are characters like Anna van Dyck, who followed the example of van den Berg, and after the war was executed for turning in 700 Jews, or Willem van Maren, an employee of Otto Frank. After 80 years since the betrayal, no concrete evidence has been found that can confirm with certainty who was truly responsible for the fateful call. The third mystery takes us to Africa. The Nazis carried out a brutal campaign in the north of the continent from June 1940 to May 1943. The Germans, commanded by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, also known as the Desert Fox, attempted to replicate the Holocaust in that corner of the planet with the help of Walter Rauff, a member of the SS and a trusted man of Heinrich Himmler.
Rauff organized a campaign to extort gold and valuables from Tunisian and Libyan Jews, and organized the placing of North African Jews into concentration camps, where several thousand died in Tunisia alone. The results of all this plundering and abuse is collectively termed Rommel's gold, which is a little unfair to the Desert Fox, for though Rommel technically had command responsibility over Rauff, in reality Rauff answered to Himmler and not to the German army.
Thus, although legend speaks of Rommel's gold, the Marshal himself did not directly participate in the looting. However, his name served to identify a huge treasure of more than 20 million pounds worth of precious metals and other artifacts taken from the hands of Jewish citizens. However, the moment of greatest intrigue arises when the plan to transport this great loot to German soil is discussed.
Rommel's gold was allegedly packed into 6 metal ammunition crates that were shipped by U-boat from Tunisia to German-occupied Corsica. From Corsica, the initial plan was to ship the gold to La Spezia in Italy, and thence by truck to Germany.
The problem was that the treasure never reached its destination. According to some sources, the gold had sunk at sea during a dangerous journey. However, new clues to this mystery emerged thanks to the account of Peter Flegg, a young engineer and diver in Rommel's service. He admitted to having been sent under strictly confidential orders to the island of Corsica. There, in an almost deserted German barracks, he met 3 officers guarding 6 metal boxes loaded with the stolen loot. Although the first option had been to transport it through Italy, partisan ambushes and Allied bombings forced them to change their strategy, and the final decision was to hide it on the seabed.
As a clearance diver, his task was to oversee the stashing of the crates offshore under the sea in a cavern. According to the evidence of an SS corporal involved in the operation that recently came to light, Rommel's gold was dropped into the ocean about 1 mile off the town of Bastia in Corsica, the exact coordinates noted down in code by the SS.
Decades later, those coordinates were supposedly found on the back of a photograph belonging to a Nazi officer. However, time and the sea are relentless. It is feared that the boxes have corroded, leaving the gold buried under layers of sediment at the bottom of the ocean. This story has fired the imagination of treasure hunters, inspiring novels and failed expeditions. But Rommel's gold, if it really exists, still remains hidden, shrouded in a veil of mystery, as impenetrable as the depths of the sea that hold it. However, this is not the only treasure stolen by the Nazis that has generated intrigue and mystery.
Its value today is estimated at 200 million euros. For 225 years, the Amber Room was at the Catherine Palace in Pushkin, a suburb of what's now again called St. Petersburg. Until 1941, when the Nazis advanced into the Soviet Union in a merciless war of extermination. Soviet troops were unable to save the legendary treasure from the German army.
In 1716, the Prussian King Frederick I gave the Amber Room to the Russian Tsar Peter the Great in exchange for some rather impressive soldiers. This piece was considered the 8th wonder of the world, a unique room covered with panels of gleaming amber and gold. Not only its beauty, but also its value, caught the attention of the Nazis, who did not hesitate to make it part of their loot.
In 1941, German troops advanced east towards Leningrad. They murdered and plundered and sent the Amber Room on its last great journey. Fortune seekers are still searching for the treasure to this day.
Art was one of the main targets of Nazi looting during World War II, and this year would be no exception. Although officials and curators at the Catherine Palace attempted to dismantle and hide the Amber Room, all efforts were in vain.
The Wehrmacht soldiers dismantled the Amber Room in 1941, packed it up in crates and sent it westward to Königsberg, now called Kaliningrad.
The Germans reinstalled the camera on their land to put it on display. However, as war drew ever closer, it was they who became afraid of losing this priceless piece.
In March 1944, there are some indications that the Amber Room was again dismantled and packed into crates. But then what?
Since that moment in March 1944, we've heard numerous witness statements from people who say they saw these crates. But whether it was actually the Amber Room in those crates is not known for certain.
The trail of the art treasure soon gets lost in the chaos of war.
The war caused many Germans to flee the regions where the Red Army was advancing mercilessly. The evacuation was carried out by different means, and one of them was by ships, among which was the old cruiser Wilhelm Gustloff. For years, it had provided recreation for German tourists, but on January 30th, 1945, it set sail with thousands of refugees on board, and there is also speculation that it carried the Amber Room. However, the ship was attacked by Soviet submarines and sank, killing 9,000 people.
To what extent could there be evidence that there were also important art treasures on board the Gustloff? Well,
Was the Amber Room also on board the Gustloff? Or had it been packed up earlier and sent to the German Reich to be hidden?
It seems hard to believe that boxes containing several tons of amber could disappear, and many historians have tried to solve the mystery. One theory is that it was destroyed by Allied bombing in 1944. Others believe it is still in Kaliningrad, while others say it sank with the Gustloff and may be lying at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. However, after 8 decades, its true whereabouts remain a mystery, and something similar is happening with another of the great bastions of Nazism, the Blutfahne.
If any one object can be said to be a kind of Nazi crown jewel, it was a flag, revered and venerated by the party faithful. The Blutfahne was a swastika banner that had been carried by NSDAP members during the disastrous Beer Hall Putsch in November 1923 in the city of Munich.
The failed Beer Hall Putsch was the act of rebellion that would later become the foundation of the Nazi regime. Hitler had wanted to take over the government by force, but was unable to. Yet on that very day, an ordinary flag became an iconic symbol, consecrated by death and fanatical fervor.
The attempt went disastrously wrong when the Munich government leaders ordered out the Reichswehr and the police, and an armed confrontation followed as Hitler and thousands of Nazi supporters and brown shirts marched towards the Feldherrnhalle monument in the city center. Shots were exchanged between the Nazis and the police, resulting in the deaths of 16 Nazis and 4 police officers.
Hitler was arrested shortly after the clash. However, he did not experience this event as a defeat. At that moment, he decided that he would rule Germany by legitimate means, and the event became a decisive moment in the Nazi movement. That is why the symbol of the flag stained with the blood of those who fought alongside the future Führer took on great significance.
During the fighting, SA man Andreas Bauriedl was shot and killed, falling onto the flag, his blood soaking into the material. The actual standard bearer, Heinrich Trambauer, was also wounded and had dropped the flag. During the confusion that followed, Trambauer was said to have escaped the scene with the flag, removed it from its pole, and hidden it inside his jacket.
After the failed coup, Trambauer gave the Blutfahne to a Nazi named Karl Eggers, who brought it to Hitler in 1925 when he was released from Landsberg prison.
Then, in 1926, the Nazis' Second Party Congress in Weimar, Hitler, in a ceremony, passed the flag to the head of the SS, Josef Berchtold. From then on, the blood flag was treated as a holy relic and carried by SS Sturmbannführer or Major Jakob Grimminger to ceremonies. Hitler would touch the blood flag against other Nazi banners in a quasi-religious ceremony known as flag consecration.
When not in use, the blood flag was kept inside the Brown House, the Nazi Party headquarters in Munich. It was displayed inside a room guarded by SS guards and brought out for major events. It was last seen publicly in Berlin on 18 October 1944, but after that date, it disappeared. There is speculation that it was destroyed in an air raid.
The Brown House had already been damaged by Allied bombing in October 1943. The building was completely wrecked in January 1945. Grimminger, later an SS colonel, survived the war, finding work as a street sweeper in Munich and later as a city councillor. He died in poverty in the city in 1969, aged 76. No one thought to ask him what happened to the flag.
Beyond what has been suggested, a great cloud of doubt surrounds the Blutfahne. Since due to the constant bombings suffered at the end of the war, many of the Nazi relics were hidden in a safe place. However, the true destination of the blood flag remains a mystery. But it is time to leave the symbols behind and focus on a luminous and enigmatic figure.
Wallenberg was dispatched to Budapest by the Swedish Foreign Office in order to help rescue over 200,000 Jews who remained there. After the occupation of Hungary by the German forces in March 1944, and with the beginning of deportations, the Swedish legation in Budapest had begun aid operations for local Jews.
The plan was to issue Swedish passports so that Jews could leave the country and escape the Germans. But the siege was only just beginning. On October 15, 1944, the Hungarian government was overthrown, and the fascist, anti-Semitic Arrow Cross Party took control of the country. Budapest's Jews were left defenseless against the murderous violence perpetrated on the streets and deportations to the Auschwitz death camp under Adolf Eichmann's direction.
To protect them from the Arrow Cross pogroms, Wallenberg, along with diplomats from other embassies, established the International Ghetto in Pest, approximately 30 special residences which housed some 15,000 Jews under Swedish protection. This ghetto was managed separately from the main Budapest ghetto. Its operation required a great deal of organization, food and sanitation arrangements, and funding.
As if this task were not enough, the diplomat issued thousands of protective passports over the course of 3 months, saving the lives of thousands of Jews by preventing their deportation. But Wallenberg did not stop there. When Eichmann organized the death marches to the Austrian border, the Swede personally pursued the convoys by car, managing to remove the holders of the protective documents from the ranks and take them back to the city. In January 1945, Soviet forces arrived to liberate Hungary. However, the celebration was short-lived.
The Soviets treated the Swedish legation with great suspicion, accusing its staff of spying for the Germans. Wallenberg was summoned for an inquiry at the Red Army headquarters. He went, thinking that, despite the Soviets' hostility, his diplomatic immunity would be enough to protect him. On January 17, 1945, the Soviets arrested Wallenberg, along with the rest of the Swedish legation's staff. All of them, apart from Wallenberg, were released several months later and returned to Sweden.
It was from this moment that Wallenberg's trail disappeared. No one knew anything more about him, and to this day, what happened to him remains a mystery.
Following his disappearance, the Soviets claimed to have no knowledge of him. German prisoners of war returning from Soviet captivity testified to having encountered him in jails and prison camps in the Soviet Union. In 1956, after significant pressure by the Swedish government, the Soviet Union finally issued a statement claiming that Wallenberg had died in prison in 1947.
There are theories that claim he was executed, and others that say he died of a heart attack in a cell at just 34 years old. But what Wallenberg had to endure during his last years of life will remain a great mystery. However, the courage he showed in his fight against the cruelty of Nazism will never let his legend die. But of all these mysteries, there is one that stands out due to its paranormal nature.
November 1944. One of the early interesting Foo Fighter reports comes from the 415th Night Fighter Squadron. They're flying missions over northeastern France. That's not far from Germany. And this is still in Nazi-occupied part of France, where you've got a number of lights, 8, 10, 12 lights coming in on the left of the aircraft group that are apparently maneuvering in a very unusual way and then just take off.
The lights moved at such a high speed that it left the pilots completely astonished. These unidentified flying objects, commonly called UFOs, were the focus of multiple reports. They were mysterious glowing spheres, usually red or white in color, that exhibited rapid movements and maneuvers impossible for the technology of the time. They seemed to follow or accompany the planes at a certain distance, but despite being disconcerting, they did not attack or cause apparent damage.
The pilots often described these objects were sort of fuzzy lights. It could be a plasma light that would come up from the ground towards the airplane. And we know that now because there have been reinvestigations of all the flights. At the time, of course, there was no Air Force. It was the Army Air Force. They were taking reports from pilots very, very seriously. Because if there was a new German weapon, all the pilots needed to know about it.
The name Foo Fighters was coined within the military as a reference to a popular comic strip of the time called Smokey Stover, where foo was used as a nonsense word. Pilots adopted the term to refer to these mysterious aerial phenomena that could not be explained. However, there were several theories that attempted to do so. Some spoke of advanced technology, i.e. secret or experimental weapons, possibly developed by the Germans or the Japanese. Other possibilities were that they were atmospheric phenomena, reflections, or optical illusions. Also, hallucinations caused by the stress of combat were added. And finally, the perspective of ufology indicating that they could be alien ships.
The U.S. government has never offered an explanation for the Foo Fighters. We know that the OSS, which was the precursor of the CIA, investigated. We know that British intelligence investigated this, and we don't have conclusions.
Although the Foo Fighters attracted attention during the war, official reports failed to fully explain the phenomenon. After the war, in many cases, the related files remained classified, which only fueled conspiracy theories and left our last mystery unsolved. Now, after having covered the greatest enigmas surrounding World War II, ghosts, magical spears, and even the Holy Grail. Although it may seem unbelievable, all these things somehow played a part in World War II. While it's known that the Führer had a fascination with genetic experiments to achieve his racial ambitions, there's an even more delirious side to his quest for the extraordinary. In this video, we'll explore the various myths that became sick obsessions of the German Chancellor and other terrifying stories that occurred during World War II. Welcome to a chilling and unusual presentation of military history. Let's begin. Fair ghost of the Nazi pilot. At the end of World War II, a German fighter plane crashed in the waters off Cabrera. A concrete cross in the small island cemetery attested that the body of an unfortunate aviator rested there. Unexpectedly, in 1982, the German War Graves Commission exhumed the remains of Johannes Buchler from the Cabrera cemetery and transferred them to the German military cemetery in Quacos de Yuste, Spain, where German soldiers who lost their lives during World War II are laid to rest. Here are images of that burial place.
Esto es un campo santo militar donde hay enterrados militares alemanes que cayeron en la Primera y la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Es el único cementerio alemán que hay en toda España. Empezaron a reunir todos los caídos que habían en toda España y los trajeron aquí. Algunos neonazis hacen aquí, vienen algún fin de semana y se acercan aquí al cementerio y ellos harán pues, sus ritos, harán sus cosas, pero no hacen nada de vandalismo.
At that time, the Germans excavated to bring to light the body of the young Luftwaffe non-commissioned officer. The corpse was in very bad condition, torn by the violence of the crash and corrupted by the long period in direct contact with the earth. The image itself was chilling, but his compatriots had come with a purpose: to bring the young soldier to rest permanently alongside his comrades in arms. The next day, a funeral honor was held, and Johannes's remains were placed in a coffin specially brought from Germany. In a few hours, the German left the island that saw him die. However, since then, strange phenomena began to be perceived in the small archipelago. During the night, muffled noises and shouts were heard in the old lighthouse. Footsteps were heard on the stairs of the ruined castle, and above all, strange moans that suddenly seemed to touch the backs of the island soldiers sent shivers down their spines. The garrison's military personnel said that a freezing breath pursued them when patrolling or when they were alone at their posts. Meanwhile, fishermen said that a dark figure watched them from the cemetery when they went fishing at dawn. The town was scared, and the legend began to gain more and more credibility. Apparently, the specter was not content with contemplating from the shadow of the cemetery. Like floating, the ghost of the aviator approached from behind those who innocently walked the island's many paths, causing them terror. Those who experienced the effect of the Nazi aviator's ghost describe it as a cold, damp feeling that runs through the body, like an eerie sense of loneliness that brushes the skin and makes the bones shake. Some veteran soldiers explained that they got used to his presence and even spoke with the ghost. They said it was a spirit that understood them, having lived through the horrors of war. To these men who had experienced hell in life, it did not evoke fear, but rather compassion. No one understood why the pilot's spirit continued to linger there if his body was elsewhere. Until one day, the mystery was revealed when it was known that the body the Germans had taken was not actually that of the pilot, but that of a poor peasant buried too close to the concrete cross. In theory, this is why Bockler's ghost returned to haunt. He was claiming to be buried on German soil or next to fellow countrymen to rest in peace. On the other hand, some locals believe he deserves to keep wandering in foreign lands for all eternity, having served such an evil and diabolical army as the Nazis. This is not the only ghost story that World War II has left us. In fact, some did not even happen on European soil. Ghosts of Hollandia. In the spring of 1944, the port of Hollandia, now Jayapura in New Guinea, was the scene of a major Allied invasion. Taken by surprise and defeated, Japanese soldiers fled to the east, and the Allies entered the island. Here are some archival images confirming this. The massacre that American troops unleashed on their enemies on the island was truly impressive. Historians assume that the brutality witnessed was a consequence of the resentment that Americans still harbored from the treacherous attack on Pearl Harbor. For that reason, any population of Oriental origin and features was violently killed by U.S. troops. The massacre was so intense that not a single Japanese person remained standing. However, locals claimed that some Japanese did survive, at least in spirit. In 1956, it was reported that residents of Hollandia had asked members of a committee to exercise an abandoned Japanese anti-aircraft gun on the beach. Locals claimed that every night at midnight, ghosts of skeletal Japanese soldiers with helmets seemed to operate the old rusted cannon and stood guard, anticipating a possible Allied attack. Despite sounding incredible, according to island witnesses, this happened systematically every night. Some disciplines close to spiritualism say that a person who dies traumatically can be trapped in this world, unaware of their death, repeating the actions that occurred moments before their death for all eternity. These ghosts are victims of murder, accidents, or disasters, and according to some religions, they need guidance from this plane to continue their journey to the afterlife. In some cases, they become aggressive, forever confined to the moments before their death. To this day, in the town of Jayapura, the area is still avoided, and some residents insist that they hear cannon shots in the darkness at night. Although it may sound unbelievable, such stories or tales not only affected some superstitious locals, but also the most sinister man of the 20th century. Wandering Dutchman. What we are hearing is a snippet from one of the operas by Richard Wagner, Adolf Hitler's favorite composer. This particular work is a representation of the horror legend known as the Flying Dutchman. Its official origin dates back to the mid-17th century when, according to the legend, Captain Hendrik van der Decken decided to make a deal with the devil under the full moon to make his ship the fastest in the world. On one of his expeditions, a powerful storm sent by the demon surprised the captain, and the ship ended up being engulfed by the waters of the Atlantic, sinking tragically. It is said that just before Van der Decken died, he looked at the cape and cursed it with the following phrase: "I will round this cape, even if I have to keep traveling until Judgment Day." The ship was considered lost, and the real event soon turned into stories, then into rumors, until they were finally forgotten. Nevertheless, a myth was founded, claiming that crews that sighted the ghostly silhouette of the ship at sea were doomed to suffer a fatal accident that would end their lives. The events were exaggerated, the ship gained fame, and the stories became the legend we all know. However, there was a man who, it is said, believed in the real existence of this ghost ship. None other than Adolf Hitler. The Führer had a fascination with the legend of the Flying Dutchman since the first time he had heard Wagner's opera, after some German warships suffered accidents, accusing having seen the ghost. Hitler did not hesitate. Intoxicated with power and with all the resources of the Third Reich at his disposal, he ordered the creation of a special division whose goal was to search for and capture the ghost ship. According to the Chancellor, they could use its curse to their advantage to sink British ships without the need to face them directly. While some more skeptical experts doubt the existence of the division, others maintain that Hitler's madness led him to squander budget and resources on these fantastic quests. In the absence of concrete information, one can only lean toward one of the two theories. The obsession with this non-existent ship was just one of the delusions about supernatural objects that Hitler dragged during his period of power. Spear of Longinus. The Holy Spear, also known as the Spear of Longinus or Lance of St. Maurice, was the weapon that pierced Jesus as he lay lifeless on the cross, according to the scriptures. It was from this event narrated in the Bible that many legends emerged around this mysterious relic, claiming that whoever possessed this weapon would have the power to build empires, but would also be cursed, foretelling defeat and death to those who lost it. As a young painter wandering the streets of Vienna, Adolf Hitler first noticed the Spear of Longinus in 1909 during a visit to the Hofburg Museum, which then belonged to Emperor Franz Joseph the Führer. Hitler frequented the lance, spending hours mesmerized in front of the display. The object consisted of a 30-centimeter long spearhead covered with a thin layer of gold and with a metal nail tied with wires. The piece had an inscription that read, "Lancea et clavus Domini," spear and nail of the Lord. Hitler was fascinated by the object and was determined to own it someday, as this account narrates.
Hitler is said to have had a complete obsession with the spear, made a beeline for the Künstliche Historische Museum when the Anschluss allowed him to come in and take Vienna. One of the first things he did was to head to the museum and take possession of the spear.
In 1938, when the Third Reich annexed Austria, the Spear of Longinus finally fell into Hitler's hands. On the night of March 14th, he ceremoniously entered the Hofburg Museum alone and held it between his fingers, enraptured. The artifact was transported to Germany and exhibited in the Nuremberg War Museum, before its final concealment in a secret Nazi crypt. Guarded by a select group of armed SS men led by Dr. Ernst Kaltenbrunner, the Spear of Longinus was only visible to members of the Thule Society, a hidden sect incorporated into the SS Occult Bureau, as well as to the Reichsfuhrer of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, and the astrologer, Dr. Karl Haushofer. As the owner of the Spear of Longinus, Hitler erected a grand and sinister empire, the Third Reich. According to legend, the Holy Spear helped Hitler conquer vast territories. Due to the Führer's distrustful and paranoid nature, he decided to protect it in an armored chamber 24 meters deep beneath Kaiserberg Castle. Accessible only through an underground tunnel with a secret entrance in the garage of an 18th century house on Oberon Street. Despite extensive security measures, Hitler fell victim to the terrible curse of the spear. It happened on October 13, 1944, when American planes bombed the city of Nuremberg, causing damage to the door of Kaiserberg Castle, where the magical relic was located. Following this incident, Hitler ordered the spear to be immediately moved to the basements of the Panierplatz school. However, during the journey on March 30, 1945, German soldiers confused the sword of Saint Maurice with the Holy Spear, preventing the evacuation of the relic. There are two versions regarding the true fate of the Holy Spear. One claims that on April 30, 1945, an American lieutenant found the spear in its original place in Kaiserberg Castle, wrapped in a bed of red velvet. Interestingly, on the same day and coinciding with the exact moment when the Holy Spear had just changed ownership, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker, fulfilling the curse that many others had suffered. However, historians, as the one we will hear from shortly, dispute this version.
A legend was created that this Holy Lance was kind of a symbol, was kind of a relic for Hitler himself. But what was created only later on is pure legend.
There is no doubt that this spectacular conclusion to World War II would be deserving if true. But according to historical reality, the discovery of the Spear of Longinus did not occur until well after Hitler's death. It was only in 1946 that the boxes containing the treasure pieces in Austria were opened and compared with photographs of the original piece, confirming that it was indeed the spear. Regardless, the prophecy and legend were fulfilled, as Hitler managed to build his sinister empire, but upon losing it, everything he had constructed collapsed. It is up to each individual to decide whether the loss of the spear played a role in this or not. The Spear of Longinus was not the only object that haunted the knights of Hitler and his closest fanatical allies. In fact, they created an SS division dedicated exclusively to them. The Ahnenerbe. The Deutsches Ahnenerbe, or Society for the Investigation and Teaching of German Ancestral Heritage, was an organization integrated into the SS as an anthropological and archaeological section. It was primarily dedicated to investigating the origins of the Aryan race. This SS Faction was led by Reichsfuhrer Heinrich Himmler and directed by Colonel Wolfram von Sievers. Wewelsburg Castle in Westphalia became its headquarters and the destination for the relics the organization Stolle Worldwide. The incredible and extravagant research conducted by Ahnenerbe recalls the script of some of the movies starring Indiana Jones. The parascientific sect, created by Himmler and Hitler, traveled the world in search of the origin of the Aryan people and powerful objects that would allow them to dominate the planet. Their greatest obsession was the Holy Grail, which they never found but never stopped searching for, as recounted in this video.
Nazis were willing to find someone who would ascribe value to it to make it fit this narrative.
Searching for the Grail would have been an enormous undertaking. The Nazis would have it as a prize that would be used to intimidate and put the fear of God into their enemy.
All these stories are nothing more than evidence of Hitler's madness and that of the Third Reich, which, in their quest to stay in power forever and dominate their enemies, were willing to believe in the most outrageous fantasy stories. We are reaching the end of today's video, and we wanted to ask you, do you think any of these stories could be true? We appreciate you for staying until the end and look forward to seeing you in the upcoming episodes of Military History.